Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Driven Wyld. Today we are talking about how much of your meals can you actually write off. So one of the many ways that you could deduct your business income during tax season, and honestly one of the most interesting, is meals. This category can come with a lot of pitfalls and opportunities, which if conducted improperly can get you into some serious trouble with the IRS. So with that said, we are talking about how much of your meals you could write off for business, what you can and cannot do, and everything in between. But before we do that, let's go over a quick disclaimer. The content of this video does not contain, is never intended to be, legal, business, financial, tax, or health advice of any kind. This video is for entertainment purposes only. It is advised that you conduct your own research and consult qualified professionals before applying anything you find online. Also, thank you to GigTax for verifying this information and making this video possible. Speaking of, here's a quick message from GigTax. It's crucial to clarify that most gig workers cannot claim meals as business expenses unless they meet specific criteria. Meals are considered personal living expenses and are not automatically deductible just because someone earns income on a 1099 basis. However, there are exceptions. For example, meals can be deductible if they are directly related to business discussions, such as meeting with other gig workers to discuss business strategies. Similarly, meals can be justified as a business expense if they are incurred while trying to recruit new workers to the platform, and potential compensation is received through referral codes. In general, meals for gig workers are treated like commuting miles. They are considered ordinary living expenses and are not deductible unless explicitly required by the employer's contract. This differs from professions like trucking, where mandated rest breaks and meals are part of job requirements. Joseph Mayo, founder of GigTax. What makes a meal tax deductible? Not all meals are considered tax deductible, and there are exceptions that we will go over. But in general, tax deductible meals are ordinary and necessary for business purposes and are not considered lavish or extravagant. An expense isn't considered lavish or extravagant if it is reasonable based on facts and circumstances. Meal expenses won't be disallowed merely because they are more than a fixed dollar amount, or because the meals take place at deluxe restaurants, hotels, or resorts. However, some examples of a meal that is ordinary and necessary that isn't lavish or extravagant include but are not limited to taking a client out to lunch, wooing a prospective client, business meals with co-workers, or a networking opportunity. However, as Joseph Mayo said earlier, if a meal is ordinary to your personal living, it doesn't count. No matter how much you really want it to, or you just want to gently push that envelope, push that boundary to say, oh, it kind of counts because of this. That's a great way to invite an audit into your house. Some examples of meals that don't qualify are snacking while working, stocking your home office with groceries, grabbing a solo lunch. So no matter how much you want that meal that you got at Wendy's through a drive-thru to be tax deductible, it is not going to be if it is for personal living. The 50% limit on meals. Now, regardless of which method you use, you can generally only deduct about 50% of the unreimbursed cost of your meals. We're going to get into specific methods in a minute. Now, once upon a time, any meal you got at a restaurant for business purposes was considered tax deductible 100%. But everything changed when the IRS attacked. Now, meals purchased after January 2nd of 2023 have a 50% limit regardless of where it came from. There are exceptions to the rule, but we'll go into that later. Methods of writing off meals. There are two methods that people can use when writing off their meals, and that is the actual cost method and the standard meal allowance. The standard meal allowance method allows you to set an amount for your daily meals and incidental expenses instead of keeping records of your actual costs, such as taking pictures of the receipts and all that and keeping track of it. The set amount varies depending on when and where you travel. You can use this method whether you are employed or self-employed, and whether or not you are reimbursed for your travel expenses. Now the rates can vary, and the amount that you can can deduct can be different based on where you actually go. So I'm going to leave a link in the description that allows you to put your destination and your local market in to see what your rates are. Feel free to check that out. Actual cost. Actual cost is exactly what it sounds like. You can use the actual cost of your meals to figure the amount of your expense before reimbursement and the application of the 50% deduction limit. If you use this method, you must keep records of your actual cost, which is easy if you have a mileage and expense tracking app, such as QuickBooks Self-Employed and Everlance, but if you don't have one of those, you could just keep the receipts. You can also take pictures of the receipts as well, so that way it prevents fading of the actual receipt. Taxes, tips, and transportation. Taxes and tips relating to a business meal are included as the cost of the meal and are subject to the 50% limit. However, the cost of transportation to and from the meal is not treated as part of the cost and would not be subject to that limit. Exceptions to the 50% limit. The 50% limit would not be applied if your meal expenses were reimbursed for the full amount, if you adequately accounted to your employer under an accountable plan as an employee. Most of us are self-employed or independent contractors, things to that effect, so that's not going to apply to us. But there are those of us who travel for work and then do gig work on the side. It would apply there. If you provided the payer with adequate records as a self-employed individual. Now, if any of these scenarios have been fulfilled, then not only does the 50% not apply to your expenses, they don't even qualify as deductible, which isn't bad either because it's really no cost on you to begin with. Why should you be able to deduct something if you didn't pay for it? However, if you were reimbursed and the expenses exceeded the amount in which you were reimbursed, the difference would be subject to the 50% limit and can be used as a write-off. Just make sure your records are spot on. Applying the 50% limit. The 50% limit on meal expenses applies if the expense is otherwise deductible and isn't covered by one of the exceptions that we discussed. The 50% limit also applies to certain meal expenses that aren't business related. It applies to meal expenses you have for the production of income, including rental and royalty income. It also applies to the cost of meals included in deductible educational expenses. And the 50% limit will apply after determining the amount that you would otherwise qualify for a deduction. The hours of service limit. You can deduct a higher percentage of your meal expenses while traveling away from your tax home if the meals take place during or incident to any period subject to the Department of Transportation's hours of service limits. The percentage would then be 80%. However, for most gig workers, this still won't apply because we're talking bus drivers, truck operators, flight crews, etc. Most gig workers operate locally. Write-off isn't income. Now, I do want to be clear that tax write-offs are great and all, but they aren't income. Just because you can write something off doesn't mean you can actually afford it. You can write off 50% of the value of your meals, so you can go out every single night instead of saving money and eating at home. But at the end of the day, that's gonna lose you more money than actually gain. So make sure that you are doing what you can for your own financial safety on the big picture, not just what you can get as a write-off. Don't be that guy. Now, some of us don't really want to track our expenses or don't want to separate their business and personal expenses and want to push some legal boundaries on what they can and can't write off. This can get you into a lot of trouble with the IRS if you F around too much with it. Do yourself a favor. Don't be that guy. Working with a tax professional. One of the best ways you can make sure that you are staying within the legal boundaries for filing taxes from year to year and using the best possible methods for you and your business is to work with a tax professional. Now, if you go to the wrong tax professional, it can end up costing you much more money than it's worth. Especially for gig workers who have a bunch of 1099s, that can add up to a lot of money if they go to the wrong kind of person, which is exactly why GigTax is here to help. Tax season is inevitable, and for every hour spent navigating tax season alone, you miss out on potential earnings, precious moments with loved ones, and expose yourself to financial risks. Recognized as the leading tax preparation service for gig workers, GigTax is dedicated to simplifying the process, saving you time, energy, and money. Founded by Joseph Mayo, a seasoned gig worker with 6,000 deliveries across 6 platforms since 2020, GigTax addresses the overlooked, overcharged, and underserved needs of gig workers in the financial realm. Driven Wyld subscribers can take advantage of an exclusive 60% discount on GigTax's tax prep, and if you act now, the first 3 registrations include complimentary tax preparation. Hold on, let me say that again, just in case I wasn't clear about it. Professional tax prep tailored to your needs. Absolutely free! Secure your spot today with GigTax using the link in the description to register and enter Wyld to maximize your savings and get back to what you do best, making the most amount of money in the least amount of time in the safest possible way. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. As always, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.